So we're just going to revisit BWV 2.6 Chorale by Bach. In a previous video we did all the diatonic or in the key easy things to analyze, and we ignored things like non-chord tones and these spots in red here because they represent either chromatic harmony or deviations from, I guess, what we call first year, second term stuff. So this is a follow-up because it's useful for second year students, and you just might also want to know what's going on here. So the first spot I want to talk about is my second phrase here. We're in the key of G minor here, and we've had a completely in the key understandable 5-1-5, you know, all 5-6-5-1, 1-5 half cadence right there. We get a strange chord here and a bunch of other accidentals, and then we finally finish up with a 1-5-1 cadence right here. So let's talk about these guys right here in the middle. First off, there's two 5 chords right here, D, D, F sharp, and A. So that's just a 5 chord, and there's my 7th right there, okay? And then here's another 5 chord, D, F sharp, A, and C. It's in first inversion 6-5 because it's a third of the chord in the bass, but it's got a 7th in the chord as well. So I'm not going to try and over explain this too much. If you're a second year student, this will be useful for you. If you want to know more about these secondary diminished chords or the Neapolitan chord here, you can look them up, or I'll get to them in a future video. So let's just work backwards from here. If this is my D7 chord right here, it's my 5 chord, and we look at this right here, I have a C sharp right there, an E, a G, and then a B flat. And this is a C sharp diminished 7 chord. And diminished 7th chords, fully diminished 7 chords, unless they're being used for linear purposes or to modulate or something like that, they only have one place where we find this, and that's as the 7 diminished 7 in a minor key. And if you think about it, then C sharp is the 7 of D. So this is what we call a secondary diminished chord. It fits into a category called applied or secondary dominance. And we just mark it as this, 7 diminished. And since normally 7, but because the third's in the bass, it's going to be a 6-5 of D, which happens to be 5. So that's how we mark that. 7 diminished 6-5 of D, which is the 5 chord. So 7 diminished 6-5 of 5. This is something you learn about in the first term of second year usually. And with this chord right here, we have the same kind of thing. If you look, there's my C sharp right there. There's my E, my G, and my B flat. It's another one of these. And so this is also a 7 diminished 7 of 5. And it's in root position, so we just put the 7 there for the figured bass. And what it does is it gives more pull or emphasis to the 5 chord, since it's of the 5. Right, so if I were just to play here, and I'll skip this chord for a minute and just play these other ones for you. So I'll just start on my 5-7 right there. See, I'll reach over to the piano here and kind of look sideways. And then here's my 1 chord and the half cadence. Okay, I'm going to skip the Neapolitan chord, that next chord coming up. But if you hear this, this pulls, that's my 7 diminished of 5 going to the 5. And it does it again right here. It pulls this, and then it goes to there. Right? And then we go 5-1, or to the 1, and then 5, and then 1. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Sounds really cool. This here, it's called a Neapolitan 6 chord. Well, Neapolitan. We mark it N6. It's an exotic chord we learn about in second year after we get done these secondary dominants. It's spelled flat 2, 4, and flat 6. Its origins are in the minor key as a substitute for the 2 chord. 2 chord would be 2, 4, and flat 6. And this would be diminished, right? But with this becoming flat 2, it becomes major. So you can think of it as a major flat 2. I'm going to put the 2 flat on that side. It's what happens when you put a chromatic passing tone between the 1 chord do and the 2 chord re, and you go do, D, re, or ra, res for flat 2. And we've given it a name, Neapolitan 6. It's basically a substitute for 2. You can think of it as a flat 2 major chord, and it likes to be in first inversion, which it is right here. And so if you think in the key of G minor for a minute, G minor 2 would be A, C, E flat, right? And we have our C and our E flat and our C there, but instead of an A, it's A flat, flat 2, right there. Neapolitan, and it has this really great opening kind of sound. I'm going to play from here again so you can hear this, and I'll just play into here so you can see what that's like. So I'm back on my 5 chord at the beginning of the measure before the half cadence. There's my 1 and there's my 5. Now to pick up for our next phrase, it goes, and it's this wonderful, like we weren't expecting that sound, and it doesn't even go to the 5 chord like a 2 would normally. It can, but in this case, Bach pushes us, I'll play that again for you, pushes us to the 5 chord through the 7 half diminished, fully diminished 7 of 5 to there. And then gets another one, and then climbs up to our final cadence, right there. So, the most famous Neapolitan 6 chord that we normally hear is in the opening phrase of Moonlight Sonata. Go look for that, you'll find it. It can occur in major and minor keys, but more likely in minor because it already has this thing. If you want to know how to find them, you look for where you normally have a 2 chord, but instead you scan for this flat 2 accidental. If you're in minor, you won't see this flat 6 because it's already in the key signature. Okay? Good. Now, Bach is a little bit before the time of the classical period where we do these modulations that are called common chord modulations, where you start the next phrase and somewhere right about here you have a chord that functions in the old key and a chord that functions in the new key. He just does it right at the very beginning of the phrase. So I guess it's a pivot chord or common chord modulation. It's just Bach and Baroque, and so it's not quite where you'd find it in Mozart or Haydn. It's sped up by a beat or so. But if you think of this G minor chord starting, you think, oh, I'm in the key of G minor. And it kind of feels that way because you went from the G minor chord to the G minor chord. But it's the 1 chord in G minor, but we're actually changing to the key of D minor. And so it's a 4 chord in the key of D minor. And then you can analyze the rest of this in the key of D minor, right? Because this here, the A, C sharp, E, and A is the 5 of D minor, and that's what we get for the rest of this, right? You see that we no longer have D dominants, we have D minors, and this all analyzes out fine. And then here for the next phrase, we're back to G minor where I had a half cadence on the 5. It goes to my 1 chord, which is D minor, but then if you think back to the key of G minor, this becomes that. How do I know I'm in G minor? Well, I look at the cadences and I see, you know, as we come up here, there's my, well, bring this up. There's my 5-1 in G minor. It's a D major chord there, and then G minor. And there's another D right there, and then a 1 and a 4 and a 5. And so it's there. Also, if you think in the key of D minor or G minor, you're going to have an E flat, right? Sometimes you'll have an F sharp when you have a dominant chord. Sometimes you can have an F natural if it's using the lowered 7th from the natural minor, if it's the chord that's not taking this to a tonic or something like that. So now if you think in the key of G minor, we can kind of explain these things right here. So in G minor, this is a B flat, G, E flat. So it's a E flat, G, B flat. And that would be my 6th chord in G minor, right? 5 goes to 6. It's a deceptive progression, right? And this is a B flat, D, D, F, B flat, D, F right there. So B flat would be my 3 chord. Yeah, okay. And we have to give it a inversion here because, right? And you might say, well, what about these things here? They're passing notes. And we get the E natural because this is starting to become like a melodic minor stepping up. But then he says, no, I'm actually not going there yet. So he's going to step back down this way. So we just get the F natural here. And this becomes an F, A, C, which is my subtonic 7 chord, again from the natural minor. Right there, these become passing tones again. Okay, non-chord tones. And because we have a lack of the F sharp for a little while, until we get to the end of the measure and to the cadences over here, it feels a little ambiguous. And that's on purpose. It opens up and has a definite sort of like non-G minor feel. It's playing between these two with the E flats from G minor, but the F naturals that are more germane to D minor. And so we get an open sound here. So I'll start right there, and you think you're in D minor because we just came from the half cadence. Actually, I'll play from the half cadence right there, like that. And then it starts the phrase. But then we get into this, right? And that's a beautiful deceptive progression in G minor. You get that major 6 chord, right? And then it steps, and then we get this 3 lifts up. It's like the relative major just for a minute, right? Between the B flat chord and the F, and then it comes back down, and then we get this here, and then I'm over to there. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But I'll finish off the phrase for you. So then we're here, 1, 6, going to a 4, and then finally a 5, which definitely camps us home into G minor. There we go. All right, now I want to talk about this chord briefly right here. It's a 5 or dominant 5 function chord right here. It's got a D and an F sharp, even the C, which is the 7th right here, and there's the D again right there. But this B flat doesn't really fit, right? Because it should be either a C or an A. It's above, and yeah. So what is this? If you go search through some old Koska Payne textbooks, they talk about this towards the end of the chromatic stuff. They talk about, or might actually be in the what kind of variant chords can you get depending on the scale that you're using. And if you look, this is a B flat, D, F sharp, which is a 3 augmented chord, if you think about it. And they say, well, that exists, but what is it really? And the Koska Payne will say, well, it technically is a 3 augmented, B flat, D, F sharp, but it functions like a dominant augmented, right? Instead of the A, it's up a half step, right? And that's all it is. It's this quasi non-chord tone. I mean, it fits if you call this a 5 augmented or a 3 augmented that's working as the dominant, and it goes to the 1. Or you can just think of it as a non-chord tone rising up through. Just has a great sound, and you know, Bach uses it to pull us back into the original key, so we lose track of this F major kind of sound. I'll just go from right here. So we're here, and it goes like, and we get this, but on top we get, and it's like saying we're not done yet. We're going to keep going. So that's what that is, okay? It's another oddity, okay? Finally, what about this right here? This chorale has been in G minor, and then D minor, and then back to G minor. And then the ending is gonna end in D major, and I guess I'll give you my best thoughts on this. It's gonna end in D minor. Like this piece is about G minor and D minor and G minor, and it's supposed to go back to D minor. But and you can think of this as that pivot chord again right there, right? So you can think of this G chord right here as being 4 in D minor, okay? But and then this becomes my 5 chord right here, A, C sharp, G, A, right? So that's my 5/7. And then it's sort of like a 1/6/4 stuck in the middle there, and then back to the 5. And then it's a major 1 instead of a minor 1. This is what we call modally borrowed from the major key. It's a picardy third. I think I mentioned that in the other thing, in the other video. I just wanted to review again. This is called mode mixture. If we are in D minor, it would be a one chord that's minor. If it's D major, it's still in the key of D. It's just one's major and one's minor mode, and they borrow it from there. There's an aesthetic thing at this time period where, and we'll see this in other chorales later from Bach, where you don't want to, you want to do your chorale in minor. It's got gravitas and things, but you don't want to end on a sort of a bitter or a sour or depressing kind of thing, because this is a chorale. It's supposed to be sung in church, and so they often do this at the end where they borrow this. So is it in D major? I mean, there's only enough to say, yeah, I guess it's in D major, but given that we had a phrase in D minor, I really feel like this is in D minor with a picardy third or modally borrowed one. Okay. One last thing here. I just want to point this out. We're back in the key of G minor here. Okay. And this is kind of a funny chord as well. You've gone G minor, C minor, passing tone, and you think this is going to be another C chord right there. It certainly has the earmarks for it, because see that C and that G right there, and you think, oh, this is just going to be a neighbor tone. But if you look, the top notes are wrong. This is a G and an F and a D, and this C just doesn't work with it. But if you call this the non-chord tone and you put that in there, then this becomes a G7 chord. And G7 is a dominant chord, and dominant chords are fives. And this is 6/5 because the third's in the bass. And G is the dominant chord of C, and C is the chord coming up right there. It's our 4 chord, so we would call this 5/6/5 of 4. Okay. So, yeah, this is definitely second year stuff. If you're using this to figure that out, that's great. If you're just going like, huh, that exists, and you muscle through to here, well, that's good for you too. You can look up these things individually in textbooks or online. Look up Neapolitan chord. Look up secondary diminished chords, right? You can look up secondary dominant chords, and you can look up modally borrowed, and or you could look up specifically picardy third, and it will explain it to you again and give you more examples. But that's all of it right there. All right, I guess we'll do 3 point whatever sometime soon in the future.